Ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prusha.
Hey, welcome everybody to Define the Fight. Happy Monday. We're looking outside. We didn't get 8 to 16 inches. We maybe got 2, and we'll take it. We are literally rolling with the punches, and when it comes to defining the fight, there's so many different ways to do so, and the guest that I have today has been fighting for our country for many years and is continuing to fight. But one thing I do want to say is when I use the word fight, it's not putting your hands up, it's not throwing down like getting in the cage or getting in the ring. But what we're going to be talking about too is there's so much fear that's instilled in a lot of individuals right now currently in life. So how do you fight fear? Well, you face it. And today we're here with Doc Pete Chambers. He has so many accolades stemming from being in the Army from 1983 to 2022. He's been enlisted in the infantryman, a paratrooper, Green Beret, special operations flight surgeon, Purple Heart recipient for a combat wounded warrior, emergency medicine physician, contractor, U.S. Senate whistleblower, and fact witness in SEALs versus DOD. Man, the list goes on and on. Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mariah. I really appreciate you reaching out, and let's get after it because we got some telling to do.
Oh, we got and you are literally down in Texas. You're on the border, and you've done so many different things for our country. And you continue to do so. So what are some of the things that you've done in the past? Let's talk about that, and then we're going to lead into the present day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just tell people, look, I came in under Ronald Reagan, and I got out of this last administration intact. So bottom line is I started out as just a kid. I was 17, went in, 18, finished basic training, thought I would do that my whole life. I got injured, and this is a story of also recovery and moving forward and doing things that people tell you can't do. Said you never jump again. There's no way you're going to ever go to Green Berets. And I said, no, that's just not going to happen. But got out, went to medical school. This is back in the 90s. And 9/11 happened. I was in residency. I came back in, went to Special Forces, to the Green Berets. And then they said, we're going to send a doc to the Special Forces course. And that was me. So I was kind of led the pack there. We got a few more docs through after me in the program. They quit doing that. But we were able to go forward, a little more forward than the aid stations and things like that. Got out of active duty, went to the Texas National Guard, did some contract work for a while, worked for Mike Glover at Fieldcraft for a little while. But I found my happy place in that I was protecting. I was with a mission protecting our border, the United States of America, particularly the state of Texas where I live. So that put me down there, and it was the best job I ever had. Unfortunately, I lost my job because I did informed consents, and I was a whistleblower and then testified against the DOD, and that makes you what's called persona non grata. So there I am, and so that's where I started being vocal and getting in the fight in a different way.
And God leads us to our fight and our mission. And you and I have had conversations in the past too, is that our mission is larger than ourselves. And when we start being in acts of service, you clearly are, and recognizing that there's a need. So speaking about the borders, I was talking to a couple individuals this morning about, you're down on the south border, but they were also talking about the north border. What are some of the things that you are seeing on the south border?
Right. So I'm going to explain this in a comparison contrast. When I started on Operation Lone Star, there were 600 of us soldiers down there. It was about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And we saw 12,500 people coming across 1,250 miles of border over about a week, sometimes 2 weeks. It would take that number to come across. And that's just Texas, because that was my world. And right now, I was there in Del Rio, December the 18th of this past year, and that many came across in 24 hours. So you can see quite a sharp increase. Now we've got it under control to a degree compared to that, because the state has taken over with the National Guard and increased the numbers on the border, obviously. And the stance has been, we'll say, leaning forward in the foxhole versus just standing back and letting it happen.
And we look at how we have so many different opinions and perspectives. And the reality is this. I know that if I was on the other side of the border with my children, I would fight like a bear cat to get my kids into a safer place for living. But now we also have to look at the fact of, on the flip side, not everybody has the same intentions when coming across the border. So I know you're seeing a lot of different things that are happening in regards to human trafficking, in regards to the drug cartel. What is it actually like? Because sometimes we're watching different screens, and every screen is the same program for the most part with a different shift here. But when you're talking to somebody who's physically there and doing some of the footwork, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I've seen the borders of many different countries and not necessarily protected them other than the South Korean border where I stood there and watched for a year. But, what I see is these people, and unfortunately, this humanitarian crisis, this is a tool, and they are being used as pawns, and they're putting them in a very precarious situation because when I say they, I'll explain who they are in a minute. But these people are being pushed through some terrible terrain throughout South and Central America, all the way up to the border, through cartel zones, through war zones sometimes, and these are different kinds of wars. And then they're being exploited. They're being, there's rape, there's all kinds of things, and then the slave traffic that takes place, and coercion, and using them as pawns to bring them and overwhelm our system. My dad was an immigrant, came here legally back in the 60s, early 60s, and did it properly. And I understand, if you're seeking asylum, those kinds of things, but most of these people are not in that category. When you overwhelm the system, what is humanitarian about bringing someone here, giving them something for a short period of time, and then letting them out loose on the streets? Nothing. So if I knew the full story when I was back downrange in my country of origin, let's say the Middle East, for example, many people come here from there. That's a long haul for a hope that is a false hope. And so if I was that mother and I knew, I wouldn't get on that ship or that plane or that train or by foot. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So what is the communication line that leads into, when we look at the numbers of individuals that are coming to the borders, A, how are they getting there? But B, how is the communication line getting to individuals to shift to get on, whether you're saying plane, boat, so on and so forth?
Right. Great question, Mariah. That's one of the things that I learned over my experience on the border, and I'm going to give you fact witness stuff because it's the best way I can explain it. When 17,000 Haitians showed up a year and a half ago in Del Rio, it was hot, and there were 17,000 people standing out in the open trying to get across the river. They did. We put them underneath a bridge so we could coordinate the reception, if you will, essentially what that was. And as people were going out, fainting, heat casualties, whatever, I'm a medical guy, so I just went into that mode and started getting on the ground. And just while I was working on people that were getting IVs and falling out, I started talking to them, and I said, "How'd you get here?" And it's a well-organized, well-oiled structure based upon non-governmental organizations that are paying for and aiding in this invasion. Well, then you look back and you follow the money after all that's over. We follow the money, and it goes back to specific organizations, some of which come from in this country, some of the money coming from within our own legislative processes in the NDAAs and things like that, National Defense Authorization Acts. Those are all illegal. You can't use our taxpayer money to bring in people from third, fourth party countries. So there is a system, but that is not only a broken system, but that's an illegal system. And so we have the receipts on all of that stuff, and it's being investigated. And there's some great people we work with from the Center for Immigration Studies, Todd Bensman, for example. Look at some of his stuff. He has the receipts for all of that. And that's what it took a while to line out. Yeah.
Well, I think what we need to do too is also drop or keep an open mind and drop the political left and right and look at what's actually coming, right? What you're saying and stating. Look at the facts. What are the facts in front? Because right now, rational state of thinking has almost gone out the window, where it's an extreme one way or an extreme the other way. And it's like, let's actually look at the scenario that's right in front of us. Now, I know you guys are down on the border. Before we dive into different components, I want to talk about what you guys are actively doing, or your community that you have organized in Texas. What are some of those proactive approaches that are going on right now?
Yeah, so that's been a something we've built, a plane that we have built in flight. And so when I took off my uniform a year ago, I really didn't have a plan for what I was going to do. I didn't expect to be fired from my job, and so I got out. I had 39 years on a piece of paper. So I got out and I just started working for local ranchers, and not really working, but just advising, because they're desperate, and some of these ranches are huge, and there's a lot of vectors of attack. So then we went to the local communities, and then it just kind of grew. And then I linked up with a think tank, which is more of a do tank up here in Central Texas, and we're getting after it in that we're speaking to communities and we're teaching them how to do their inner and outer rings of security and how to organize. This is not about, this is about, like you said, this is life. And what do you want? I mean, most people in the world, in all the 50 something countries I've been to, is they just want joy. They just want to see their kids grow up and see them get married and grandkids. They just want joy. And how do you do that? Well, it's not about comfort. It's about joy. And it's about being satisfied with the things that you have, and then being a good steward of those, whether they're your children or whether they're your automobile, your land. So what I see is a group of people now in these 5 or 6 different Texas communities that are organized into who does what by their strength. And then how do we then support the next neighborhood or the next community over there? So literally last week, a group of 6 different communities got together, their liaisons, so they could all talk in exigent circumstance. What would that be? Possible hurricane, possible winter storm. We just got through our winter, so we're in full blown spring. I hate to as you guys are hitting snow drifts, but that's what we're at. That's where we're at. But that's what our communities did in small towns where I was from, is we took care of each other, and I'm just watching that, and that's truly goes back to my military training of 39 years going, or life. What is the truest virtue of a warrior? And that's love. And when you operate out of love, the people next to you, those behind you, who you're protecting, and then respect for the others that you might have to fight, because sometimes you do, you don't operate out of hate. And that's really the mantra for that. But the communications and organization is just amazing to see happen.
You mentioned taking care of each other. In the last however many years, you've seen a lot of different separation. I feel clearly intentional, where I know Russia in the past had stated, divide and conquer. That's how you're going to win or beat the United States. So we are divided on race, we're divided on religion, we're divided on political views, vaccine, not vaccine, all of these different components. Mm-hmm. But what it circles back to is when we have the ability to reflect. What are our true values? And question them. Question them, right, just like you would question anything else. And then circle back to say, okay, I can see that this person is in a place of pain. How can I assist them? So you're talking about, setting up in regards to natural disasters, or setting up in regards to food responses. It lies right so much deeper, where when we cut hate, or when we look at our social media posts, where is it actually stemming from? Right? Because
right, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the people that divide. And I'm going to use a term because I grew up on ranching areas and horse ranches and cattle farms ranches. Is if you got a fence is busted, and in this fence, just imagine, if you're listening, that one side of the fence is where it's busted is red fence, and the other side is blue fence. And so a guy like me comes along on my horseback, and I'm checking the fence line. I found the hole, and then we bring that fence together with a come along, and we mend that fence. And then as soon as you mend it, the color the red and the blue just disappears, and it's just a fence, and it's just doing its job. And so that is what truly my purpose has become. And they're a lot like us, and you and I have talked, and we feel the same way in many regards. So it's just mending that and not letting those Hegelian dialectics, these left and right or up and down, whatever you want to call it, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. United we stand, divided we fall is so true. And it goes all the way back to the patriots of old. And once we start doing that, we start ignoring whatever happens in DC when it becomes that dialectic. We ignore whatever happens in our state capitals, and we, the people, all just go out and just do our thing, ignore them. We don't play on their game field. We play on our game field. And that's what we'll all move forward, and we don't have to define anything other than love.
You brought up a couple more great points, and first and foremost, what is that going to take? Well, I think it comes down to each individual has to take those actions upon themselves first. and then it leads into the next, right? So I use the lingo of, if you look at light bulbs, you're going to have individuals right now that have darkness. You're going to have individuals who have their light on, and then there's going to be the light bulbs in the middle that are flickering. Who are you going to be? Are you going to be the person that will assist the person in the middle and turn that light on? Or are you going to be the other individual who's going to completely take that light bulb out? So before you can actually assist another individual, you have to be selfless and self-aware to make sure that you are building a strong foundation within yourself. So then that will start pouring into other individuals. And after that happens, I mean, what can you foresee in this reset? Because really that's what we're in, is we talk about political, but we're in a reset. So what does that look like to you?
Well, we control our controllables. You know, the first rule that you do in chaos is you figure out what's going wrong with my parachute as I'm falling through the sky at terminal velocity. I reach for I stabilize my body, and then I reach for the device that's going to save me from hitting the ground at, like I said, terminal velocity. So we control the controllables. And in all this chaos, we reach out to the 50-meter targets, the 100-meter targets. And beautifully said there with the light analogy, it is exactly that. It is find your strengths, and your light may be a little bit different tint than mine, but they're lit fully. And so we find our strengths and we operate in those, but we still do it out of love. And we will all move forward, but we've got to control the controllables, because the controllables in this reset on our side, if we operate that way, we'll move forward. They operate out of fear, and fear is an accumulator. Cowardice is an accumulator. So is strength, and so is courage. And so I've seen it on the battlefield. I've taken young lieutenants as an older colonel and said, "Hey, bro, turn around, do your job, lead your men." They're young. They're my son's age, and they get it. And then they come back afterwards and say, "Thank you." It's just the reset of that mind to get out of that fear, in that mire of fear that they're in. And it's circulatory. So I use a lot of principles like OODA loops and left of bang theory and all these things that we could go in for hours about. But honestly, it just boils down to focus on the mission, look for work, keep your mind on that and off of the fear. And I promise you, together, because it's an accumulator, together we'll move forward. We'll get up that beach.
And it takes time, man. It takes time and it takes work. I think that's the key thing too, but also having an open mind. We're so close-minded right now. And when you're close-minded, what it does is it actually creates blind spots. And you don't want to have any blind spots where you're taken unaware. Can't even think about the word, but I'm just throwing it out there. You get where I'm going. Like today it's Monday. Yeah. We're going to roll with it. But we all have different blind spots. But if we can eliminate those as much as we possibly can, then that's where true success starts to rise.
Right. The blind spots as a team, when I'm out in the jungle and I've got a guy on point and I got a guy pulling rear security and I got left and right flanks covered, I can't see over there and I can't see over there. But as a commander, I can listen to those guys and go, "This is what I see, boss, Raj." And then we'll move forward, or we'll back off, or we'll flank. But each of those pieces of that view, your perception is reality. That's another thing. Where I live, my perception is different than yours. You have a problem on your northern border. You absolutely do, especially up in the Washington State area and all the way over to Maine. But it's not as profound and pronounced. But to them and that perception there where they live, as far as numbers, it doesn't matter that we might have 12,000 in 24 hours and they have 150 or 2,000. It matters their perception. We grab all those pieces of information, and then that's where these little groups of people now, when they're talking to each other, they're understanding each other's perception. And that communication is key. I mean, there's key principles in this, and that's one of them.
Well, that's where we've failed as a country, is the communication barriers, because we haven't been open to listening. We listen to respond instead of listen to, hold on, let me absorb this information and take it in. And it's the same with like personal training, right? So I could go to a seminar and take different pieces of it. It doesn't mean I have to agree with all of the philosophies, but I'm going to take little segments and then vice versa and implement what I feel is best. But if we don't take anything, then all we're doing is limiting our growth and our potential.
Yeah, and we've got to share all of that and share the good and the bad, and necessarily not necessarily the ugly, but sometimes we got to share the ugly, and those are called hard truths, and it's okay because it's not meant for fear. It's when I speak to groups, and sometimes they say, "Boy, that was really scary to hear." Is there Chinese cells running around the United States? Yes, there are, and they've been doing it for 20 years. We just didn't know. Now, what are they doing? Well, some of them are derailing trains, and we can go into hours of that, and I can give you the receipts on all that stuff. But that's scary, right? Well,
Yep.
those are hard truths. I'm not going to take my news from CNN or Fox. I'm going to measure 3 times to cut once when I hear somebody say something. I need to make sure that it's verifiable, actionable, that it comes from multiple sources and it makes sense to me. And that's all those things, those perspectives, they all come from the whole principle, the team principle.
Absolutely. What do
Mm-hmm.
you foresee coming? Now, again, everything is a theory until it becomes a fact, but that at the same point, you have a lot of different resources and
Mm-hmm.
clearly knowledge so that you're able to base more of a scenario off of it.
Right. So I operate in a principle of threes when it comes to my own decision making processes in my teams. I'm responsible for my team, and so what I look at is the 3 day principle, 3 month, 3 years, and so I forecast that way as well. So for the 3 days, it's what I'm doing the next few days, and when I'm looking at the media sources that I trust or the points of contact that I trust, people that I physically call and say, "What do you got going on, bro? Check it out. This is what I got." And we link those up. I'll make sure that I'm prepared for whatever it takes to do for the next 3 days, next 3 months, next 3 years. And it's just that way. And of course, those are depending on the target as how close they are. So the answer to all those things is always depends. But what I see is and I'm not a prophet. I wish I had that capability, but I do listen to people that have the spiritual aspect to that really feed into my life, and I read the Bible, and I look at that as my field manual, if you will. It tells me what I think is corresponding to what's happening. So that being said, right now for us down in Texas, we are seeing a decrease in the numbers right now. The rivers have risen because of the rain. The rain goes into the Rio Grande, and it less people coming across. But there's already enough inside right now in a lot of these convention centers, whatnot. They're going to run out of their resources, and they're going to be desperate. And when people get desperate, they do desperate things. And so a lot of people have moved off of the border that have the ability to do that. But those people that don't, they're there. And so those communities I really focus on and get those communities together. And these are just being self-sufficient. Should the power go out? I know people, electromagnetic frequency or EMP, don't worry about that stuff. Those are controllables we can't control. If the power goes out from a hurricane, I've been in Hurricane Katrina, Rita, Harvey, and responded to it. Their power was out for weeks. You'll survive, but you've got to be prepared to survive. So that's where the groups come in. Who's got what? Who can bring what? Who cares about who? And so those are the things. And then I look at the election thing. Yeah, that's a decision point. It absolutely is. Is there going to even be an election? If one side wins or the other, will they get stupid on the other side? I don't know. I can't tell that, but I'm looking for indicators. We can continue this discussion another time specifically on that because there's hours on that. And I do work with people that are in the know. So that's what I do. And then the long term is, are we self-sufficient as a community? First of all, as a family, as a community, or as an individual in my case, but I do have a dog and a horse. But, we are sufficient and capable. We are sufficient. We are prepared, but we're sufficient too. So that's it. I mean, that's just how I look at things. And any specific things we can talk about. Absolutely, Mariah.
When you look at breaking it down, like micro chunking it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you gave some different key points there. Now, what does preparing for 3 days mean? What does preparing for 3 months mean, right? So that's
Right.
it's broad.
Good call.
So if an individual is like, okay, so what are those needs? What are those things for
Right.
survival that I should make sure that I have in my toolbox in case everything goes south, so on and so forth?
Raj, yeah. So when I'm thinking about 3 days, let's think about a very good example in your area of the world is, when people are driving, I spent some time up in Minnesota and in the Dakotas hunting out there. And when I went in my truck in wintertime going through that territory, y'all have go bags in your cars just to survive for 3 days should you get stranded in a storm. So yeah, that right there is my 3 day pack out. And of course, I'm military, and I through and through. I can't get away from it. Right, 39 years of packing to go to war. 20 years of that at war. Um, you pack out, so you load out, and you think, what are the potential things that could hurt me and not survive? 3 minutes without air. Okay, well, somebody's choking me out for 3 minutes. I got a problem set, so I got to get out of that one. But 3 days without water, 3 months without food, or weeks, some people. But I've done it for 3 months of eating pine needle tea and drinking pine needle tea and honey, so you can survive. But I'm going to tell you that that's the 3 day thing. All right. So that's just prepared for that. And just think about what are the things that I could, in my grasp, have it with my person to make it 3 days, or my family. And then the 3 month thing, that's where you can have a store of just dried foods, things like that. I tend to use certain brands. I'm not advertising, so I won't. But that have shelf lives. Now MREs are great, but they're not really the best thing for you, but they'll do in a pinch. And then the 3 month also is looking at what does my community have. So here we have a lot of victory gardens, we're calling them, and we're prepared for that. And then we had our first group here in Hays County, Texas. All right, named after a famous Texas Ranger. In Hays County, we had our trade days. And so everybody brought their tents out and started trading the things, chicken, eggs. Some people brought goats, chickens, goods, canned goods. So start trading with your community or knowing their strengths. So that's the 3 month principle, just getting further out there. The ability to procure items and have them stored, but also to share. And then also purification of water, the techniques that you will use to do that. Just study. There's plenty of stuff out there. You don't need a reverse osmosis, purification system. You can do it with other sources and methods. That's what I'm talking about there. Just life itself. And then defense, that's up to each individual, what they feel they need in their area. If I live in downtown Portland, Oregon, it's a lot different than when I live in a town of 48 people down here on the border versus in North Dakota. If I know my town and my people, but it's all different.
It's crazy when we look at preparation, and it has now taken on this negative connotation. Oh, you're a prepper? Why? I don't get it, right? So I look back at my grandma, right? So she died at age 102. She was the oldest female deer hunter in the state of Minnesota at age 94, right? So she was a machine, but she prepped everything, right? So they had canned goods, so on and so forth. And now we have just shifted into this mindset of quick, easy, convenient, or the laziness. I just don't have time. No, the reality is you haven't made time. That's really what it comes down to. So it's, when did that actual shift occur? Because, I know, was it in World War II that they were tearing up their yards to then start creating and building gardens?
Victory gardens. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, slow down and live life, right? I mean, if that could be on a t-shirt, I would do it. Slow down and live life. And what does that mean? That doesn't just mean, go out there and look at the bluebonnets because, they're growing right now in Florida and Texas, but it means go out there and look at the bluebonnets and at the same time do something to, as we say, shore up your battle position. I'm always going to use military terminology, shore it up. So when I dig a hole in the ground, I'm kind of safe. When I put some other things on it and I put an overhead cover, I'm a little bit safer. When I put a poncho over it, I'm not wet. So slow down, live life, keep shoring up your position every day and enjoy it. Put the phone down and go out for a while and just don't even look at it. You don't need a tether to your neck to survive. I didn't get a phone till I was 30 something. So, that changes everything because I know what it was like then. I was a lot happier with regard to the noose around my neck I call a cell phone.
I think that's a lot of people too. You start looking at mental health and true connections. It becomes this device that has now become the lifeline instead of actually living life on how it was intended to be, where we're present with, whether it's our partner, our kids, whoever you might be out, having a meal with. But then it's also too, it's getting your hands back in the soil because nature is the most powerful healing source and it's free. That's what floors me, is that it's free. And we've become, like you said, we've had this noose around our neck where it's like we have the opportunity to remove it if we choose to.
sure do. Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. When it's, I can do it right now because it's not cold, but, and you guys can't do this today, but, get out, take off your shoes and just walk through the yard, walk through the, not hard gravel, but get out there and enjoy it because that's what you did as a kid. And that's what I did. And that's what we do, right? Because that gives you so much more benefits from that alone. Get your animal and just feel the energy off your animals, your horse. I mean, that's why I grew up riding bareback, and that's just what we do. We feel that energy, but that's connection to the earth, which is connection to a lot of really positive, and I don't know, I'm not a crystal guy. Okay. But I'm definitely another person that understands dirt. I lived in it for a long time. And the first thing I would do when I get on a battlefield, I'd pick it up and I would just put it in my hands and rub it together and feel it. And I was one at that moment. I have this saying that I use, and it's my spirit and my soul and my flesh, my body. And in my spirit, that's a different thing that I use as a connection to a relationship with my master. And my soul is what really feels the battlefields that I've been on before I've ever been on them, because I understand this dirt, and it's no different than a dirt in it might be a different context, makeup of that particular soil, but it's the same earth. And then my flesh, it's your senses, your smell, your hearing, your sight. You take all these in, you develop patterns, and then you've been there before. And then you follow those patterns, and they'll take you to a place where you're going to be victorious as long as you sense that. But you can't do that because this thing right here, it ain't got no. I'm even ashamed that it's within arm's reach. But it's a thing that takes away all of that, and it makes you two-dimensional, and it makes you become a digit.
It takes away life is really what it does. But, you gave some great points in regards to grounding and the importance of it. So, Doc Pete, you have been absolutely amazing. And we spoke about different ways for people to be prepared and proactive, but you have to win the battle in the mind before you step foot on the battlefield. Let's talk about mindset and different ways that people can really wrap themselves around it, because that fear, it's intense and it can be debilitating. So let's lead into how can they overcome that fear?
Yeah, I'm going to use an analogy real quick. So I have a working dog that lives with me 24/7, and he is a Dutch Shepherd, combat dog, bomb dog, you name it. But his whole life is just literally on the edge, and he's 11 years old, but he's still the same as he was when he was 4. And he is just literally shaking, looking at me like, what can I do next? What can I do next? He's excited about every single thing that happens. And he doesn't care about food. He doesn't care about anything else other than he's just happy when I say, hey, well done there, pup. You did good. And no treats, no nothing. He doesn't need it. We'll fast 1 day, 2 days, 3 days together, and then we'll come back and we'll go to fighting and doing stuff, and we still train. And so we love it. We love every minute of it. And you got to be excited about what you're doing. Looking for that work. Look for work. It's a motto. It's a thing. And so first of all, that's the way you wake up every morning. When you do that, you set the tone for the whole day. Things are going to step in your way. As soon as your day tries to take you over, stop it. Take it back over, because that right there, keep that momentum going, because that's going to take you to win the fight. Some people say I'm old because of my numbers. No, sorry, I'm as good once as I ever was. And I may not be as fast, and I may not be as easily to repair, but I promise you, we're going to come in when we do our job, and we're going to dominate whatever position that it takes to dominate that moment. And it's not out of pride, and it's not out of anything else. Then we're just enjoying life, and we're looking for work. That's the attitude right there. I hope I gave that clearly.
It is. It's an indomitable will where there is no second. It's like, we're going to go now, and we're going to take full advantage of the moment and be blessed for that moment. But then also too, it's recognizing that, you're not speaking out of ego. And I think sometimes people think, oh, ego. No, you have to have confidence. Confidence in what you're doing is completely different. So if you're an individual right now that lacks confidence, why? Question that. Why am I lacking confidence? Is it the lack of action? Is it the lack of action? Or
great question.
Right?
Wow, not just great statement. Amazing. Yes, and yes. So this is something I've learned over the last little bit here, is because they when you lack confidence, and I've been there. Look, I went to medical school and became a doctor as a grunt, right? And I was looking at these people that were seemingly way smarter than me. And the first briefing that I gave on something medical, they were just laughing at me because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was a young medical student. But I learned. And I learned to quit worrying about how they look at me. And most recently, I've adopted something that somebody gave to me. And it says, see yourself as God sees you, nothing more, nothing less. Now, when I wrote my statement on that and I put it on my refrigerator of how I wanted God to see me, man, it took off. And it was just like, I don't really care. I don't really care what people think. I mean, you could have a 2-star general screaming at me. And I just go, well, sir, that's an unlawful order. And that's how I got fired on the border, by saying that to him, because I didn't care what he thought of me. I cared about the right thing that I was doing at the time, standing in the gap for the oppressed, if you will, my soldiers. And that is what Green Berets do. Dio Presso Liber, our motto, to free the oppressed.
I love that. It's dropping the opinions of others, because when you're leading from a heart-centered space, it shouldn't matter. And that's what it comes down to, is we base our being, our worth, on thoughts of others, when the reality is, when somebody is basing an opinion of you without knowing you, that is just a clear reflection of they haven't done their internal work yet. And you know what? They're in a different chapter, and it's okay. And it's okay. Just give them grace. But at the same point, it's learning where you're at and knowing where you're going. It's different. Now, Doc Pete, let's talk about how individuals can learn more about you and find
Sure.
you on the website.
Well, I used to be where I didn't want to be found, but now I'm forced in that position. So it's drpetechambers.com, drpetechambers.com. And that's a place where you can go. There's a link to my Telegram. That's the primary resource I have. I also have X, which is Twitter, and that is Doc Pete Chambers on that, at Doc Pete Chambers. But truly, my website is what I use to share with people. It's a line of effort page. You just go there and you see what I'm working on. You can kind of send me a note on there. There's a way to connect, and I'll look at it. If it makes sense, I'll say great. And if it doesn't, I just probably won't answer, because I'm gonna stay nice. But but if I'm hearing something in there that I can learn from, I'll learn from it. I've learned from medics on the battlefield when I was a trauma surgeon, or trauma doc. That's how we do it. Perspectives, perceptions is what teaches us what's happening on the other side of the hill. So I'll learn from that. But share with that, and please reach out.
I appreciate you more than you know, in regards to what you have done for our country and what you continue to do for civilians and individuals who really need help and who really need hope. So continue defining that fight, continue to win that fight. And for each and every single person right now that is listening to the show, take a deep reflection on your life and own how you're showing up. And if you need to create change, if you need to make that pivot, do so, because this is not a lone wolf mentality. We need to create a pack, and we need to work together to make sure that we're shining that light and we're sharing that love, because at the end of the day, if we want to win that fight, we have to define it together. So thank you again, Doc Pete, for being on the show. I look forward to learning more about what you have all in the makes.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you, and it's great to be here.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great Monday. Live the dream. You're not the nightmare, because you only have one life. Let's go after it.